She stood in the rain with a suitcase in her hand as the door slammed behind her and her husband screamed, "You're nothing." Every word cut deeper than the cold night air. She had no money, no place to go, and nowhere to hide. Cars passed, people ignored her, and the storm kept falling harder. Just when the world decided she was invisible, headlights appeared. A black Bentley rolled out of the darkness. The door opened, and the man who stepped out was about to destroy the lie that she was nothing. Forever. The rain came down hard that night, the kind that felt sharp against the skin, soaking clothes within seconds and turning the world into a blur of cold lights and shadows. Sarah stood frozen on the doorstep, her fingers clenched around a small, worn suitcase, her heart racing as thunder echoed above. Behind her, the door slammed shut with a final, cruel sound. "You're nothing," Mark shouted from inside the house, his voice filled with anger and pride. "Do you hear me? Nothing. You came into my life with nothing, and that's exactly how you're leaving." Sarah didn't turn back. She didn't scream or beg. She had learned long ago that silence sometimes hurts more than words. 3 years of marriage ended in that single moment. 3 years of supporting his dreams, believing in him, cooking late dinners, listening to his frustrations, and ignoring the small insults that slowly grew into daily habits. Earlier that evening, she had asked a simple question, one asked by wives everywhere: "Are you okay?" That question triggered everything. Mark accused her of being useless, of dragging him down, of embarrassing him in front of his friends because she had no powerful background, no wealthy family, no name that impressed anyone. "You don't even have parents," he said cruelly. "You have nothing." Those words struck deeper than he realized. Sarah had lost her parents at 10 years old in a sudden car accident. She grew up moving between foster homes, learning how to survive quietly and depend only on herself. She never spoke much about her past, not because she was ashamed, but because the pain never truly left. What Mark never cared to ask was whether she still had family. Standing now in the rain, Sarah stepped off the porch and began walking. Her shoes filled with water, her hair clung to her face, and every step felt heavier than the last. Cars passed without slowing, headlights splashing water onto the sidewalk. To the world, she was invisible. Eventually, she reached a small bus stop and sat down, exhausted, her body shaking from the cold and shock. She opened her cracked phone and stared at the screen. There was only one number she had never deleted, one promise she had never used. Uncle Daniel. Her finger hovered, pride fighting fear, but another roll of thunder made the choice for her. She pressed call, her hands trembling. The phone rang once, twice. "Sarah." A calm voice answered. Her strength broke instantly. "Uncle, I'm sorry. I didn't know who else to call." There was no anger, no hesitation. "Where are you?" he asked. She told him softly. "Stay there," Daniel said firmly. "I'm coming." For the first time that night, Sarah felt something warm return to her chest. Hope. The rain slowed to a steady drizzle as Sarah sat at the bus stop, hugging her knees and staring down the empty street. Minutes passed slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. Part of her wondered if she imagined his promise, if maybe it would take too long, if she truly was alone again. Then she heard a sound that didn't belong to the night's chaos. A smooth, powerful engine approaching with calm confidence. Headlights appeared at the end of the road, cutting cleanly through the rain. A sleek black Bentley rolled to a gentle stop in front of her. The driver stepped out first, holding an umbrella, followed by a tall man with silver hair and a commanding presence. Uncle Daniel. He moved quickly toward her, his eyes filled not with judgment but concern. "My girl," he said softly, wrapping his coat around her shoulders. "What happened?" Sarah tried to speak, but tears answered instead. Daniel didn't push. He guided her into the warm car, handed her a towel, and nodded to the driver. "Take us home." As the Bentley glided through the quiet streets, Sarah stared out the window, watching the rain blur the city she thought she knew. He said I'm nothing, she whispered. Daniel's jaw tightened. He has no idea who you are. What Sarah never truly understood until that night was who her uncle really was. Daniel Carter wasn't just a caring relative. He was a self-made billionaire, a man who built an empire across real estate, technology, and global investments. Powerful people knew his name, newspapers wrote about his decisions, but to Sarah, he was simply the uncle who paid her school fees, checked on her birthdays, and told her she mattered. He never showed his wealth because he wanted her strong, independent, and proud of herself. That night, however, something inside him shifted. The next morning, Mark woke up feeling justified. He believed he had taken control, convinced Sarah would come crawling back. Then his phone rang. "This is Daniel Carter," the voice said calmly. Mark laughed nervously, not recognizing the name. That laughter faded quickly. "You threw my niece out last night," Daniel continued. Mark tried to argue, but the call wasn't a discussion. Daniel informed him that his job was terminated, his investors had withdrawn, and the bank would be reviewing his mortgage. "You can't do this," Mark whispered. "I already did," Daniel replied before ending the call. Within days, Mark's world collapsed. Friends stopped answering. Deals vanished. He searched the name Daniel Carter and felt his stomach drop. Meanwhile, Sarah rested, healed, and slowly began to remember herself. Daniel never spoke of revenge, success. He told her gently, "We'll say everything that needs to be said." Sarah stayed with her uncle for several months, not in luxury but in peace. She woke up without fear, ate meals without criticism, and slept without feeling small. Daniel encouraged her to rediscover her passion for design, something she once loved but slowly abandoned during her marriage. He offered advice, not money. "Build it yourself," he said. "I'll guide you, not carry you." Sarah worked harder than she ever had. She studied trends, practiced endlessly, and faced rejection after rejection without giving up. 1 year later, her small brand began gaining attention. 2 years later, it was featured in a major magazine. Invitations followed, interviews followed, respect followed. Sarah stood taller, spoke with confidence, and no longer introduced herself as someone's wife or someone's burden. One evening, at a high-profile business event, she stepped out of a car wearing a simple yet elegant outfit from her own collection. Cameras flashed. Inside the hall, she felt a familiar presence staring. Mark stood frozen across the room, his suit cheap, his confidence gone. He barely recognized her until their eyes met. He remembered the rain, the suitcase, the words he shouted. Sarah looked at him calmly, nodded politely, and walked past without stopping. No anger, no revenge, just silence. Mark understood then. She was never nothing. She was just standing beside the wrong person. As Sarah later stood on stage accepting an award, she thought back to that night in the rain. The moment she was told she was nothing was actually the moment her real life began, and sometimes being kicked out into the storm is exactly what leads you to the road where a Bentley is already on its way. Mark's life unraveled quietly at first, then all at once. In the weeks after the phone call, he convinced himself it was temporary, that powerful people often played games to scare others. He woke each morning checking his email, refreshing his phone, waiting for good news that never came. His boss stopped replying. The investors he once bragged about meeting suddenly claimed they were busy indefinitely. The bank letters arrived next, polite at first, then cold. Mortgage under review. Payment deadline revised. Penalties applied. Mark began selling things to stay afloat, starting with small items and ending with the ones he once used to show off his success. His friends disappeared just as quickly. Calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped. The same people who once laughed at his jokes and praised his ambition now crossed the street to avoid him. At night, Mark lay awake replaying the argument, hearing his own voice shouting, "You're nothing." The words felt heavier now, like stones pressing against his chest. He searched Sarah's name online obsessively, hoping to see failure, hoping to feel justified. Instead, He found silence at first, then success. Articles, photos, interviews, her name connected to creativity, discipline, and rising influence. The realization hurt more than losing money. He hadn't just lost his wife. He lost the only person who truly believed in him when he had nothing. One evening, desperate and humiliated, Mark drove past their old house, now nearly taken by the bank. He sat in his car and finally admitted the truth to himself. His power had always come from standing on someone else's back. Without Sarah beneath him, he had nothing to stand on. He thought about calling her, apologizing, explaining, but he knew it was too late. Some doors don't close loudly, they close forever. Mark's fall wasn't caused by Daniel's influence alone. It was the natural result of arrogance, cruelty, and the belief that love was weakness. As weeks turned into months, Mark faded into the background of a world that once applauded him. The man who kicked someone out in the rain now struggled to face his own reflection. And for the first time in his life, Mark learned what it truly meant to be nothing. Sarah never spoke publicly about her marriage. She never told the world about the rain, the shouting, or the night she was thrown away. Instead, she let her work speak. Her brand grew not because of her uncle's name, but because of her relentless discipline and honesty. People trusted her vision because it came from real pain and real growth. At home, Daniel watched quietly, pride hidden behind gentle smiles. He never reminded her who he was or what he could do. He simply showed up, just as he promised years ago. One evening, Sarah sat with him on the terrace, the city lights glowing in the distance. "Why didn't you tell me everything earlier?" she asked softly. Daniel smiled. "Because I wanted you to know your worth without my shadow," he replied. Sarah nodded, understanding at last. She had learned strength not from protection, but from choice. Years later, Sarah started a foundation to support young women who felt invisible, unheard, or trapped in relationships that stripped them of dignity. She never told them to wait for a Bentley or a savior. She told them to survive the rain, to make the call, and to keep walking forward, even when the world says they are nothing. On the anniversary of the night that changed her life, Sarah stood alone in the rain again, not in pain, but in reflection. She smiled softly, remembering the fear, the cold, and the moment hope arrived. Some storms break people. Others reveal who they were always meant to be. Sarah returned home that night not to luxury, but to peace. The word nothing no longer haunted her. It had become the starting line of everything she built. And somewhere in the city, a Bentley passed quietly through the streets, not as a symbol of wealth, but as a reminder that true power arrives when you finally